going on, everybody? It's George here from NVISION on our latest episode of Brews and Buzzwords. I'm here today with a very special guest, David Giffen, who is an award-winning author, keynote speaker, and coach, and the founder of the 403LC. I believe I said that right, and we'll get into what that means in a minute. David joins me today, and we are going to talk primarily about resilience in life, and how that translates to resilience in the workforce. So thank you very much for being here, David, and having this conversation with us. I think it's a super important topic, especially when we're talking about mental health and substance abuse issues. And, you know, we are all facing certain challenges in life. I think that's a good way to put it. And obviously, it doesn't stay in the home all the time. It does translate into the workforce. So really intriguing conversation. So thank you for being here.
It's good to be here, George.
Very much appreciate it. Tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background, and then, you know, we'll get into some of the resiliency conversation and what truly is a resiliency expert. It was really intriguing when you and I were speaking earlier.
Well, I've told a story at almost every juncture of my life, from some times as a teenager to my times as priest, as a preacher that I spent 10 years as, and then as a crisis worker, working in a rapid access addiction medicine clinic, responding in the middle of the night with police. And I've told this story over and over again, and it seems to really resonate with people. And the story goes like this. There's a guy walking down the street in the wrong part of town, and he stumbles and he falls into a hole. And the walls are so steep that he can't get out. He's yelling, he's crying, he's screaming. First guy walks by. It's a cop. And the cop notices he walked past a line he shouldn't have, so he throws him a ticket down in the hole. Then a doctor comes along, and the doctor sees he's in pain, so he writes him a script for pain medication and throws it down the hole. Then a priest comes by, writes out a prayer, throws it down in the hole, and he moves on too. But then a very particular type of friend comes by, maybe a coach. And he jumps down in the hole with our guy. And our guy says, "Are you stupid? No, we're both down here." But the coach says, "But I've been down here before, and I know the way out." And that story again and again, whether it's at a wedding or a funeral or a baptism, or with someone who has just experienced deep trauma in their life in the middle of the night on a 911 call, that story resonates with people because it reminds us we're not alone. And that's the key to resiliency, is connection.
Right. And I think that is a very profound, unique story that will resonate with a lot of people. So in the story, the individual jumps in and helps this individual because they know the path out, because they've likely been there. And I think oftentimes we fail to realize that we're not in things alone. We're not in it alone. So there are others that could be supportive. I suspect when I was reading up on your bio and checking out your website, you started the 403LC. First of all, I'm curious what the 403LC actually means.
Yeah.
So I'd be curious for you to kind of open up about that and where the name came from. But then also, it is a collective. It is others who are in this group that help, you know, support others who are in the hole, if you will.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say?
Totally.
So what is the 403LC?
Well, it comes from a long time ago. LC stands for Leadership Collective.
Okay.
But the 403, and once in a while I get somebody saying to me, "Aren't you in Calgary? You know, like area code 403? And no, that's not what it is. But so I've been down in the hole a number of times in my life, and I think it's silly to pretend that's not true, because that's part of being a resiliency expert, is that
Part of being a human.
Yeah, well, fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
And I think that's why the work we do resonates with people, because it is part of being human. But at 18, I moved out of my parents' home. Some people would say I got kicked out of my parents' home, but I moved out of my parents' home, and I moved in with someone who became a big brother in my life. And I had spent a lot of time not in the healthiest dynamic in my family of origin, and I didn't really know what it was like to be vulnerable and uncriticized, vulnerable and open to love, vulnerable and not alone in that hole. And it was a place where friends became family, and we faced challenges together. And I learned things that I had never imagined I could learn as a young man. I tell my former roommate and someone I call my brother, Sheldon, I tell him that the clay was fairly well molded, but he raised me in a lot of ways. And that was apartment 403. So
Okay.
403 Leadership Collective.
So the 403 comes from where you lived.
It
I was
probably
trying to figure it out myself. I thought,
Yeah.
like, must be an area code. Then I'm like, is it some play on the 416?
could be Highway 403 too.
Yeah,
on the way up to Sarnia.
Yeah. So it's good. It's good to know, and I certainly can respect and appreciate that. So this collective really is a support mechanism for those who are seeking, some assistance or help in any which way. And I know you've been an ambassador of a bunch of different organizations and groups. I want to tie this all back, obviously, for the relevancy of our conversation and being a business owner and, having staff. There is a very humanistic approach that we follow here at the agency, because I think we all face challenges in life, and that likely will never change. And in this day and age, with what we're seeing with social media and the messaging that's dominating the platforms, a lot of toxicity in the messaging. There's a lot of beauty in social too. A lot of human connection can be created there. But what I want to focus on is really the resiliency. And I took a quote that you had written down. You said, "Leaders are not born, they are forged in the fires of change." And I really love that quote, because I truly believe that without adversity and challenge, it's hard to really solidify. So in the world of, what you do as a resiliency expert, maybe you can touch on that. How would you describe a resiliency expert to those who are tuning in and listening to this podcast or watching this video?
Yeah, well, the thing you come to realize over time, and I'm not unique to understanding this, maybe unique to articulating it, is that there are no leaders who have not failed. There are no leaders who have not faced adversity. And if they have not failed and if they have not faced adversity, they're not leaders. They're just guys taking a walk. And the best leaders have often faced the most difficult challenges and had to climb out of the deepest holes. And that's when I say forged in the fires of change. I might even be borrowing from Tolkien a little bit in that. But the fires are real, right? Like when you're alone and it's dark and you're not really sure where your next move is going to be. That's where leaders are made, right? Like it's in that place where you're not sure what's going to happen next, and having someone else who has faced that before, or faced it alongside you, or has a little bit of insight, or can show their scars or their war wounds or whatever you want to call it, sure, makes a big difference. I'm working with a business leader right now who, he had a failed political campaign, picking his business back up from where it was before, and I have no expertise whatsoever in his field. Sure. He's a logistics expert, and half the time I can't actually understand everything about his business. Sure, but I understand resiliency. I understand what it's like to have had to pull yourself back up, and that nobody does it alone. I'm able to provide insight and see the whole board and help people make moves in the right direction that won't land them back where they were before.
And I think oftentimes that's a real valuable attribute of somebody who's coming in with no bias, right? So you're not necessarily always seeking guidance or advice from somebody who knows you well enough that is going to coddle you or maybe soften the reality of what you're going through, but tell it to you like it is in honesty. So, from the perspective of running a business and what we do here, it is unique. I'd like to think of our agency as unique because we do put a lot of care into the human aspect of things. And when you mentioned the other day, as we were preparing for this, saying, I'm a resiliency expert, I just think of how much resiliency you need as a business owner to face certain challenges, to be honest and upfront with those who are facing challenges, but never really losing sight of the human approach, going back to your story, getting in the hole with the individual to help support them, right? So from the perspective of the business and what you're seeing, when it comes to resiliency as a society? Are we lacking that? Are we starting to see being fragmented? Because I certainly see it. I see impact of media today, the impact of social messaging today, and I see this fragmentation happening, especially in the youth, where, like I have 4 children, most of the audience knows that, but I'm very conscientious of what they're observing, because I don't think it's teaching them resiliency. I think it's putting false promises in front of them, and I think that's a big challenge. What do you see from your expert perspective, and obviously your consultation, your coaching, your public speaking? What do you see?
Well, there's a couple things here that because you said a bit there, and I want to address a couple of them. One is that nobody knows resiliency better than entrepreneurs. It's just the truth, because everything you learn about the next steps comes from all the failure that you've had.
Sure.
I've
been through it numerous times.
Yeah, right. And so I think we have a void in leadership in our society right now, a deep void in leadership. And it has to do with an entitlement to comfort and contentment. That is the problem for the next generation. And I hear my dad saying it to me as I'm saying it, because, my dad came out of like the poor back corners of Scotland, and people say you can't pull yourself up by your bootstraps. I actually think he did, but literally,
yeah.
And I didn't understand, and I wrote about this in my book. I didn't understand that being raised in an environment where I didn't have to achieve at a high level to make money because the generation before me had figured it out before me. You don't learn all the resiliency you need to. You actually have to fail.
Sure.
You have to fail a whole bunch.
Yep.
You have to have things not work out. You have to be rejected. You have to really not know where the next step is going to be, and that is where leaders come from, right? Like they do. And if nobody, I grew up in the suburbs, right, where everybody bought the biggest house they could buy, the biggest property and the most room, and you had your castle with your fence. And I live in the city now. I live downtown. I intentionally don't have a car, and I take the TTC because it keeps me connected to the city, keeps me connected to real people.
Yep.
And people who have faced hard things will have the most and the deepest insights on where to go next.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we're very fortunate that we get to do these sorts of things. And I think if I'm going to, give any sort of guidance or direction, I would, especially to those who are just getting into entrepreneurship or starting their businesses, it's not all daisies and roses or, blue skies and sunny days.
It's not all Christmas parties.
No. Very, there's a lot of adversity that you do face. So, where I find dilemma is when I see messaging that suggests that this is easy, that running a business is a simple thing. You just flip a switch and all of a sudden the floodgates open with an abundance of business and money coming in, and it's worry-free. Yeah. And I think and I speak to a lot of young entrepreneurs quite frequently, and one of the things that aligns with what you're saying, David, is you are going to fail, and it's a beautiful thing if you can take something away from that. And I think that ties really well into your key messaging of resiliency is like, appreciate the fact that failure is not actually failure. It's an opportunity. And if you look at it that way,
it's our greatest teaching tool.
For sure.
It is.
It really is. Because without it, how would you ever know to try something different or try it in a different way to get past what we deem as a failure, right? And I think there's this stigma in society that if you don't do something right the first time, then it's considered a failure. Whereas I think we have to change that narrative to a learning opportunity or whatever vernacular nomenclature you want to use, right?
One of my favorite quotes is by an African sprinter who said, "The devil whispered in my ear and said, 'You cannot withstand the storm.' And I whispered back, 'I am the storm.'"
Yeah.
Right? Like we are going to face some very rocky ground and some tumultuous storms, and it's facing them unafraid. That's the difference, right? It is. It's if you've been through it before, you're more likely to get through it again. It's those first failures that sting like hell because you think you had everything figured out. You really do, right? Like you start a business, you had some prospects, everything started to go and then it didn't go. Or you publish a book and it comes out like a lion and then goes to sleep, right? These things can happen and you have to face them, right? And you have to learn from them, and they are your best teaching tools. O'Shea Jackson, who's better known as Ice Cube, says that if you're not willing to put 5 years of work into something without making a penny, then don't even start.
Amazing. I wish it was only 5 years for me. But yes, it's very true. You have to put in the grind in order to ultimately achieve what you deem to be successful. And that's relative to what you deem successful, not what the world is telling you is considered to be successful.
So for what I do is, one of my clients calls me his trench buddy.
Okay.
Right? Is that because it is hard, right? It is like we're doing this kind of stuff. It's hard.
Yeah.
And you don't want to do it by yourself. So if you can have someone in the trench with you, it lessens the load a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, so in my world where I'm very heavily involved in obviously the digital marketing community, I'm very heavily active on LinkedIn, and oftentimes when I'm there and I'm just reading the success rates of everybody who's posting something, there's really very few posts that really stand out to me about challenge and adversity and what people are not necessarily painting as this glorious achievement that they've, like, I see a lot of glorious achievements. Yeah. I seldom see somebody be vulnerable online, and I don't know if that's, again, fear of looking as if you're a failure. So I'm very open in having these conversations because I think it's integral for us to be honest with those who are coming into their futures and their careers, to say that, we the generation above you, and I don't like to age myself, but those who have gone through the storms and are still going through storms.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's all right, man. Don't worry. Like, it's not going to be the penthouse suite with the, Lamborghini and these beautiful ocean sunsets that you're going to live in every single day. That's not the reality for a majority of us. Some may get fortunate.
Some may get it some days.
Some may, right. But I think the key is to understand that you are going to face challenge, and I think what I'm hearing from you is having that guy in the hole with you is okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost a necessity.
Much more than we've ever named before, because we are, especially for men, let's be honest, what we got taught, at least in the culture I grew up in, was suck it up and dig in.
For sure.
Right? Like,
I heard it many times.
Right? And that's not, go phone a friend and, share the load, right? Yeah. It's really not. It's suck it up and dig in and keep going.
Right.
And there is wisdom to that on some level, because I'm working on another book, and it's called No One's Coming to Save You. And that is the truth, right? You don't really become an adult until you realize that. And I realized it a little later than some other people, but no one's coming to save you, right?
Right.
But at the same time, when you jump down in the hole with someone, it's not to save them. It's to come alongside them. It's to shed light for them. It's to guide. It's not the same as saving. And saving doesn't actually help anybody. It just, lessens the pain of the failure until the next time.
And that's self-realization. When you come to that consensus that nobody's coming to save you, you want people to be around that can be supportive, but you ultimately you need that self-empowerment to say, I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
One way or another, I'm going to grind for 5 years knowing I'm not going to make money.
Totally.
As Ice Cube put it.
Isn't it great?
Fantastic. But that self-realization and giving you that self-empowerment to say, A, it's okay if I don't do well.
Mm-hmm.
B, no one's coming to save me.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to do this.
I got to keep going at least.
At least keep going. It doesn't mean you have to be in any which way a terrible human being to those around you. It just means make sure you take care of yourself first, because once you start realizing you got to take care of yourself, then it's a lot easier to take care of those around you and be that support system for them.
And that's where personal resiliency really comes in. I work with a number of people because I've worked in rapid access addiction medicine. I've worked at the Toronto Community Crisis Service. And the work that I did there had to do with responding to things like suicidality and serious addiction, often addiction that required medical intervention. And people aren't really aware how widespread this is. Right, that it's not. This is not just something that exists in a particular segment of society or a cultural group or an economic category. Addiction and mental health struggle exists across the board, everywhere.
Sure.
And a lot of the time, because of the level of stigma around it, people get worse and worse and worse by hiding and covering up and not having someone to get down in the hole with them.
Sure.
And so if business isn't going well, what's happening in your personal life? What are you leaning on? Where are you going? What are you doing? Why is it happening that way?
Sure.
And so sometimes digging out of the hole is sharing experiences of the clients I've worked with over the last 20 years. Even my work as a priest, right? We ran homeless shelters, and I've heard 1,000 confessions and married 200 couples and put 300 people in the ground. When you sit bedside with someone who's taking their last breaths, you really do get to understand what it's all about and what matters and what doesn't matter. And usually what matters is figuring out who you are and whose you are.
Yeah.
I was commenting on your authenticity post the other day, and
right.
If you can find an authentic voice and find security in your attachments, you have everything you need.
For sure. I agree with you. And I think that's another real important bit of insight, and it really intelligent for those, again, who are watching, is when you are active on social, I think it's integral that you are authentic, being your authentic self and ensuring that the messaging, whatever it is that you're saying, you live and breathe it and don't be a hypocrite. Live and breathe what you're ultimately professing you're doing or suggesting or recommending. And that's why I like these conversations, because they really touch into the human aspect of things. And I think not to put a broad umbrella over everybody, because there is a lot of authenticity that is out there in the world, and there's a lot of beauty out there. But I think we are starting to see how the impact of social media and messaging, if it isn't authentic and it's being fabricated to sway one way or another, really does have an impact. And we're seeing it with a lot of mental health.
Yep.
And you being an ambassador and really that resiliency expert in helping those. I think we need more of you and more people who can share their stories openly and honestly. So just quickly, as we kind of sum up, what sorts of advice can you give those, whether they're folks who've been in business for 20, 25 years, like myself, or those who are just starting? What can we share with them to kind of give them a pointer, a piece of advice with respect to what you do and resiliency, so they have something to take away?
I'd say first and foremost, you're never over, right?
Yeah.
And look in the mirror and say that 3 times.
Yeah.
You're never over.
Sure.
Right? Because we have moments, whether it's somebody who's struggling with suicidality and mental health, or whether it's someone who's ready to close up shop, it can become quite a thing, very overwhelming to believe you've got nothing left. And you do. You have way more left than you think. You're never over.
So the piece of advice is keep going, I suspect, right?
Keep going.
Yeah.
Keep going. That storm isn't as bad as you are. I promise, you're better than the storm.
Yeah, that's awesome. You're better than the storm. So keep going, and what, tying back to what David's been saying, tying back to what we do, obviously, as business owners, we are going to face challenge and adversity almost on a daily, weekly basis. Some storms are more challenging than others to get through.
Mm-hmm.
But if you set your mindset to continue to go forward, forge forward authentically and be your true self, I think the sun is eventually going to come out.
Yes, it is.
And the waters are going to calm, if we're going to use our nautical analogies. So I think it's integral that we continue to push that message as business leaders, as those who are coming up in the ranks in the business world, whether you are a manager, a director, or an employee of an organization. I think it's integral that to know that you're going to face challenge and you will get over it.
And when that storm settles, right, like you want to know who you are you who you want to be, and who's around you? That's it, right? Like, and if, like I said, if you're authentic to who you are, and not just authentic to who your brand says you should be, but your brand is authentic to who you are, and you're surrounded by authentic, deep relationships that are secure in their attachments, you got it.
Yeah, I love that. I love that a lot. And I think that is a great message to spread and to share. So I know you're an award-winning author, and I know you've written a book. Tell us about the book really quick.
Sure.
And tell people where they can grab it.
I don't know. Where did you hold it here? Is that good? There we go. So the book is Redemptive Trauma, Confession of a Defrocked Priest. And the book, it's about a whole chunk of my life, right? Like it's a memoir, so I told lots of stories in it, but it's really about being in the hole and trying to find a way out. I wrote it in 2020 during the pandemic, and it's really a eulogy to the first half of my life, really saying I'm done here and I'm forging a new way. It won a couple of awards. It did come out like a lion and then went to sleep a little bit. But it's gotten some interest again lately as my business has grown. People are kind of curious, who's this guy who keeps saying these strange things, and what did he write about? So it's about the end of my life as a priest and my beginning of my life as me.
Amazing. And where do people get this book?
You can get it at Indigo, Amazon, Barnes & Noble. It's all over the digital sphere. Redemptive Trauma, you'll find it.
Awesome. We'll definitely put a link in our caption below of where you can find the book, how you can get to learn a little bit more about David. 403LC, now we know it's his room number.
Not anymore.
But I just want to say thank you for being here and having this open and honest conversation. I think there's some amazing little tidbits of tips and advice on kind of forging forward, as you put it, and being your true authentic self, integral not only in business but also in life. So thank you for being here, David. Really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today. Again, thanks for all of those viewing. Appreciate it. See ya.
Thanks for watching this video. If you got something out of it, please like, subscribe, or share it with your friends.